you did lead into the estate planning segment now. And so let's talk a little bit about that. First, most people who are trying to build a family and a business and or maybe just some wealth, and they're diligent savers, they bought some property, they maybe even have an investment property, they don't have necessarily even a business, but they just have bought some properties, and those things have increased in value. Estates actually are created sometimes by accident, and they don't even know they have an estate. So kind of help us walk through what is an estate. Sure. And why do we need to be concerned with it?
I want to demystify this, and I want to start by saying estate planning is not just for the super wealthy. Anyone who has something of value has an estate. That estate might be, my father is an author, and he has his writings. And let's say he had no money, but he had those writings. Those writings are part of his estate. And what does he want to have happen to that? Well, I could tell you, my father wants his writings to go to University of Minnesota because they have a library about Sherlock Holmes, and that's what my father writes on. So that is a very important part in his estate planning. And we literally, in the last month, signed documents that talked about who would be in charge of that and what they would do. Now, did he have to do that in his official estate plan? No, he could have just said, Howard, I want to go here, and we'd make sure it gets there. But he was making a point, one, to the recipient of that he's taking this seriously. And it was very important to him. He spent a lot of time collecting books. He spent a lot of time writing on the subjects. He wants to go to the right place. So that doesn't have anything to do with money. So I have people who have $100 million and don't think they have multi-generational wealth. Now they might need to see a professional for help, and I have people who have $1 million and think and know they have multi-generational wealth. And it's important to them to make sure that this wealth is distributed in the right way. And there's so many dynamics that have to do with family planning, have to do with the disposition of assets upon death. And some of them have to do with taxation and estate taxation and gift tax rules and estate tax rules. And some of them just have to do with what they want. Mm-hmm. Now let's start with, and I had this discussion with someone yesterday, you either are going to make your own estate plan, or the government, specifically the state that you live in, will make it for you. And I'm pretty sure you won't like the one they make for you. Yeah. So, for example, if you're married and you have children, and one passes away in many states, if something has a named beneficiary, like an IRA, like a life insurance policy, those go to the named beneficiaries. If something's owned in common, in joint tenancy, it goes to the surviving person. But if something's owned in one's own estate, it does not 100% go to the spouse. And that can be very detrimental for some surviving spouses. Those, in many states, in a state that's owned personally, will go half to the children and half to the spouse. I don't know who wrote these rules a long, long time ago when the state was founded,
right.
But at the end of the day, might not be what you want. But you have the right to make your own estate plan and not use that. But if you don't take that right, then the government steps in. And usually they don't step in the right way in this case. So let's make our own estate plan. So to do that, we have to decide what we want. A couple rules on estate planning. Fair does not always mean equal. And that's a really important statement, because if someone has $1 million and they have 2 children, it's simple to say, Well, they both get $500,000. But what if during one's life you gave one child $300,000? Is it still fair? It's equal, but it might not be fair.
Right.
What if one family member's in the business and another's not, and part of the estate was made up because of their hard work, the next generation's hard work? Is equal fair? And do you really want that business owned by a sibling that's not in the business? So we have to think about what you really want. And these are not fun discussions, and they're difficult discussions. But it's part of adulting, it's part of aging. You may have children that can manage their own money, and you may have children that can't. What isn't fair is to make some children in charge of their siblings. That's not good for Thanksgiving dinner. So what are you going to do? How are you going to find a trustee? I'm working with a basketball player right now. He's on the list of top 50 basketball players in the history of the NBA. He's a super fantastic guy. He has super kids. There's a bunch of them, but he has super kids. Some of them may even play in the NBA also. And in that case, he wanted a trustee. He's created a pretty good sized estate. And he couldn't find a trustee that was willing to serve in that capacity that he thought was appropriate. Mm-hmm. So we had to find an institutional trustee. And that made me actually really sad, because he knows so many people, but they just didn't fit in this scenario. Or the people were concerned that there would be dysfunction and it just wasn't worth it to them. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, so there was a concern about he will have at least one child who is very, very wealthy in their own right because of their skill set in basketball. Maybe another one. And then have others that won't have, at least at a young age, that same opportunity. So if that's the case, do we want to treat people equally? Maybe. Maybe not. But you want to talk it out. You want to have communication. You want to get input from professionals. So once again, anything that you have as value is your estate, and you have to plan for it. Okay, that's the first thing. You have to give thought to it. And then on top of that, we have we have complex situations because of the estate tax. Now, starting January 1st, every person has the ability to give away, upon death, $15 million in assets before there's an estate tax from the federal government. However, each state has a different rule. I'm talking to you right now from Illinois, and Illinois' state estate tax is different than the federal estate tax. So there is a tax at the state level on assets below $15 million, and there's only a federal estate tax above $15 million. So for someone who has a $100 million estate, and there's not many, but there's more than you think, and that value includes everything. It includes a song catalog for someone who is a musician. It includes the business that they built. It includes their qualified plans and their non-qualified plans and their investments and their homes, the art on the walls, their collections, whatever makes up one's estate. And if all that, let's say, ends up being $100 million, and you get to pass $30 million estate tax free, that means there's tax on $70 million. And guess what the highest federal tax rate is? It's the estate tax. It's 40%.
Wow.
So 40% of $70 million is $28 million. And the government says that needs to be paid in cash in 9 months. That's a lot, and it's a lot of liquidity. Now, what if you owned a stock that was valued a lot, and 7 months later you went to sell it and it was valued less? You're out of luck. So you have to prepare for that. And you have to figure out where the liquidity is going to come from. It might come from cash. But then not only are you paying estate tax, but you're using up all the liquidity you have, or much of it. Or it could come from this amazingly special product called life insurance. Because what do we know about life insurance? Life insurance grows on a tax-deferred basis. The death benefit is paid income tax-free. And if it is structured correctly in something called an irrevocable life insurance trust or ownership outside of one's estate, then it comes in estate tax-free too. So if I met that client who has $100 million and they didn't want a diminution of value of their estate, they want $100 million to pass to their children, and I would want to put in place a life insurance policy equal to the future estate tax. So in that case, if we didn't use future values and we have $70 million of a taxable estate, $100 million estate, $30 million free, leaving $70 million times 40% is $28 million. I'd want to sell a $28 million life insurance policy. I'd want that owned by an irrevocable life insurance trust. If they are married and they have something called an all-to-spouse will, meaning that everything in my estate goes to my wife, everything in my wife's estate goes to me. And the reason for that is, one, it's a good thing to do in many cases, and two, there's no estate tax until the second spousal death. Then that policy could be a survivorship life insurance policy, insuring two people, but nothing happens until the second spousal death. And as you can imagine, that's less expensive than a single life insurance policy. If someone's single or they have a blended family, that estate tax might come in on the first death. So you need an individual policy. Now, we all know people who have married someone much younger than them for a second spouse, or a third spouse, or a fifth spouse, or sometimes a first spouse. But let's say they have a child that is of similar age to their spouse. If they sign an all-to-spouse will, they've basically disinherited that child. So wouldn't it be nice to have a life insurance policy owned by an irrevocable trust with that child as a beneficiary, and saying, you're not going to receive any of this of my estate because it's going to my spouse and she needs it to, or he needs it to live. But you're going to receive this $5 million life insurance policy, or 10 or 50 or 100 or 2 million or 300,000, whatever the number is. I think people would be comfortable with knowing the plan. They wouldn't be surprised, and they would appreciate it. And they'd appreciate the adulting. They'd appreciate the responsibility. Because the last thing a surviving spouse wants is the kids looking over their shoulder. I don't want them to spend money because it's really mine. And the children don't want to wait.
Yeah.
So there's so many things about estate planning, but the most important things to look at is, one, is there an estate tax? If there is, we have to deal with it at some level. Two, is there a family fairness issue of, do we need special assets going to special people? If I was in my father's business, and if my father had a business and I was in it, and my brother wasn't, and it was a small business, I would not want to be partners with my brother and give half the income of the business that now I'm running on a full-time basis to my brother. I love my brother, but let him do it himself. I don't need to pay him. But what I would want is, I'd want the business, and I would want my brother to have other assets. That other asset could be an insurance policy, or it could be cash, or stock portfolios, or a house. So there are those issues in family fairness. There's capabilities issues. I have clients whose children have far more money than they do. And most of them would say, I still want my estate to be divided by my children. But some might say, hey, my daughter is a hedge fund manager that's worth $1 billion. I have $3 million worth of assets. I have 3 children. Why am I giving my daughter that $1 billion? Now, before you don't, you better have that discussion. And maybe even that daughter in that fictitious family would say, yeah, I don't need to be in your will. But their daughter might say, do you know what? Those are special dollars. Those special dollars because you worked really hard for them. Those are special dollars because you saved for your future and didn't spend. Those are special dollars because you made choices to benefit us. And although I don't need the money, I want my children to have that. And I'd like my share to go to my children directly, and they're going to remember their grandparents. Okay, that's fine. My brother's a history professor. He's a Holocaust scholar. He is far more successful in his field than I am in mine. He's brilliant and he's my best friend. Economically, he's in a very different world. My father knows that he can never get to zero because I won't let him. And he'll be taken care of. And if he didn't know that, he might come to me and say, hey, I'm going to divide my estate by 2 instead of 3. It's not moving your needle, but it would move them. But we've actually had that conversation, and I'd rather say to my brother and sister, well, I'll manage this money. If you ever get to zero, I'll take care of you like family hopefully should do that love each other. But you know what? I don't want your children to benefit more than my children, so I eventually want that to go to my children. That's a reasonable conversation. So 1, family fairness. 2, family capacity. Are people capable of managing this estate? Giving children money that they're not capable of managing is the same reason why you see sometimes athletes and entertainers, and I'm going to put young hedge fund managers or traders in this also, or influencers or Bitcoin, crypto bros. They don't have the capacity to manage this money because they don't have the life experience yet. So part of an estate plan is 1, as a parent to mentor the child to be able to do that. And 2, if they're not capable, have a trustee to do that for them. And I think that's reasonable. At some point, you could be co-trustee, and at some point, they could take it all over. Some of my clients like to manage things from the grave. Some of them says, I don't want to manage things from the grave, but they do. And others say, hey, I just want to give them 10 years. Or I want to give them a third of this estate right now, and we'll give them a third in 10 years and a third in 10 years after that. So it's a reload. And if they blow the first third, they'll learn from it and they'll do better in the second third, and then they'll do better on the third third. There's lots of ways to do that. So 1, there's the tax issue, there's the family issue, but what I tell my clients is it's all about Thanksgiving. And you want to leave your estate in a way that your kids have Thanksgiving together. Earlier today, I had a really busy morning now that I'm thinking about it. Earlier today, I spoke to a friend who is in a family squabble. His spouse passed away, and his children own part of the family business. His brother-in-law, his spouse's brother, is controlling the business, and he thinks he's doing some things very unfairly that are benefiting himself and his children and not the other owners of this company, which are my friend's children. And they are having a legal battle. And now they're spending a lot of money on lawyers. And there's not going to be Thanksgiving. And if I would have been able to have a professional conversation with the deceased parents or grandparents here, the people who started this business, it would have never happened this way because the planning was messed up. This was completely predictable. And in the best case of scenarios, it works. Because in the best case of scenarios, everything works. But we can't plan on that. So this was predictable, and a family fight that's ensued was predictable, and it could have been prevented by thoughtful estate planning. And again, I'm going to say that throughout this session, no one, my father told me this, no one ever got broke paying for good advice. Find a good lawyer, find a good attorney, find a good insurance professional, financial security advisor, and together work with a plan that works with your family. And what works for my family isn't the same as your family, isn't the same as someone else's family. We make sure that what works for you works. And at the right time, we communicate it to our children. We have too many times that we talk to parents, they say, have you communicated this to your children? Nope, none of their business. I don't want to kill their motivation. Okay, your children are 60 years old or 70 years old and they're about to retire. Maybe they should know. Because you don't want them. Ever been in a house where there's a picture or there's a tchotchke or there's a piece of furniture and there's a sticker on it with someone's name because the parents wanted them to walk around and say, who wants what?
Yeah.
One, probably not legally binding, but I guess they've thought about it, but at the same time, probably not the best way to do things. Let's document things. Let's put it in writing. It can always be changed. Wills could be changed. Trusts could be changed. There's something called decanting. Even irrevocable trusts could be changed sometimes. So, but the key is spend the time, spend the energy, and spend whatever money it costs to make sure it's right. Because a client told me this once, and I believe it to be true. You die at least 2 times in your life. Once is when you're actually dead and put in the ground. The second is when the last person forgets you. Well, I don't want anyone to forget me. I want my financial legacy, and more importantly, my legacy, to go on to my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, all the people I touch in business, and my friends and my family. So what have we done to make sure that happens? What have we done to make sure that my family still has Thanksgiving together each year after I'm gone? What have we done to make sure that my grandchildren, cousins to each other, are friendly? And we have so many people in Hawaii, and I see this in Hawaii a lot. I mean, what wonderful families, and everyone's connected. And I actually want to one day, I thought about this the other day, I want a family chart of how everyone's related in Hawaii with us, because it seems like everyone's related somehow,
Right.
or at least they call everyone cousins. And but how nice is that? And then you have some rich people that aren't talking because they were fighting over something. That would break my heart that I worked so hard. I didn't spend money when I could have. I didn't benefit myself when maybe I could have, to save for future generations, and that's all messed up. That's the last thing I would ever want. And these are the conversations that you could have with your clients to make you different than the other advisors. Because these are the hard conversations. These are the conversations that makes a difference. And these are the conversations that make you referable. And for someone to say, hey, Bill Pienias really cares about me.
That's right.
He went through this process with me to help with estate planning, and I know my family's better off. You should talk to him too.
And Howard, let's come back for 1 second to that original part of you saying that everybody has some form of an estate. And as you ended with family fairness and capacity, all of those they affect every family. And if you mentioned, if you don't put an estate plan together, the government will. So it seems almost very obvious, even if you're not going to pay an estate tax, you have to pay attention to how the estate is going to be handled. And that's typically done through a will or a trust. And that means that you need to have a professional attorney, or is there another person that they might want to include in that conversation?
So there's a couple core documents are the most important things. A will, a trust, and healthcare powers, durable power of attorneys for healthcare. Those are the most important documents that you have. And before, even in the most sophisticated estate, we deal with those core documents first. Everything with our clients typically should end up in a trust. Trusts have some sort of protection. Trusts don't go through probate, while assets in your estate are public at death. Instead of, would you rather have your assets passed privately or publicly? Most people would say privately.
Right.
And you'd have pretty big ego to want them to pass publicly. So I want them to pass privately. Thus, I want them in a trust. The other assets in my will should say something like, all the assets that aren't in trust go in trust. That's what this will says. But that goes through probate, okay, because they pass through a will. So things pass either by a will, by trust, or by named beneficiary. A life insurance policy, an annuity, qualified plans, passed by beneficiary. Ownership of bank accounts and brokerage accounts could pass because they're owned in joint tenancy or tenancy by the entirety, or they could have payable upon death. I actually just got new checks, and my checks say Howard Sharfman, POD Jamie Sharfman. I don't know where that came from, but I obviously have a POD, payable upon death, in there, and they put that on my check. I ordered new checks. we didn't need that, but so make sure they say that, and then your durable power of attorney of healthcare or advanced healthcare directive. You need who's going to make healthcare decisions. If I'm a vegetable, someone could pull the plug on me, and I'm totally okay with it. I hope it doesn't happen for a long time, but if it does, I've lived the most charmed life, and I'm not looking back or having regrets. But if I got a chance, I want them to do what they can if I have a chance to be back as well as I was before. Right. So make sure that we have these directives. If you have young children, the hardest one is who's going to be in charge of the children. So who's going to be a guardian, and who's going to take care of the money? And those two people should not be the same people, because there should be check and balance. There should be more than one person. And so if something happened to Jamie and I when our kids were little, maybe they go to my brother, maybe they go to a family member, maybe they go to a friend, whatever the situation is, but someone else was managing the money. And by the way, my estate said, I want that person to get paid. And none of them would want to get paid, but I want them to, because especially one of them, they would need a bigger house. They need a different house. They shouldn't, money's there. Let's use it for everyone's good. Right. So very important to have those core documents, and it doesn't matter how much money you have, because it talks about your stuff too. Now, there's a statement when they say it's not about the money, it's about the money. But sometimes we've seen families fight over the silliest things that really weren't about the money.
Yeah, Howard, I heard this: when people die, people change, and right. It's just the way it is. I've seen it happen and affect families, even my own personal family with my mom and dad.
Yeah, there's a special ring. I want that ring, but she promised it to me, but I want my wife to have it. Whatever it is, I will tell you, I have zero attachment to things. I have 100% attachment to people. But I have cousins who have significant attachment they have attachment to people also. They're wonderful people. But they have so much attachment to things. Everything has a story. Everything has a meaning. I'm not that way, okay? I have attachments to people. Now, would I like to have, and I have a watch that my grandmother brought my grandfather. When I need really good luck, you'll see me with a Patek Philippe watch that I wear very rarely. But if I need something special to have, I'm going to Papa Charlie's watch and I'm putting it on. And there's a green box in my house that came from my grandparents' house. And if I had to run out in a fire, and I had to, besides my family and my dogs, I'm taking that green worthless box, I'm taking a watch that would cost way more to fix than it's worth, and I take some pictures. But besides that, the stuff doesn't matter to me, but it matters to some people. So let's know who we're dealing with, and let's make sure the estate doesn't cause a problem.
Howard, if I can turn into maybe a very unique area, but it seems to affect hundreds of people and maybe even thousands of families, is children with special needs. So somebody has a special needs child, and they're very concerned with, one, how this child is going to be cared for. I know you and I have had private conversations about this because I have two cousins that are special needs, and it's dear to my heart. Help us walk through this situation. What are some things they should be thinking about, and how does that affect in this planning as well?
Okay. Well, it's so important because the number of children with special needs, young adults with special needs, and adults with special needs are increasing every year. Don't know why. I don't think it's Tylenol, but I don't know why. And and yes, it of course matters why, but for this conversation, it doesn't. For this conversation, we have to make sure that assets do what they're supposed to do. So what do we know about, let's say, someone with profound special needs? They're probably going to get some government assistance. And if they're going to get some government assistance, the government's going to say, you got to use your money first before you use mine. And as a taxpayer, I think that's absolutely fair. Okay?
Yep.
So, but there's ways to work within that system. So that way is, one, you have a special needs trust. And a special needs trust says the trustee could provide funds to help with the support of this child with special needs. And my daughter taught me a long time ago, and I think it's still right in today's world, it is a child with special needs or an adult with special needs, not a special needs child. The child comes first, she told me. So I think it's still correct today, and I always use that because I want to be appropriate. And I would never want someone to feel badly by words that I use. And so if we have a child with special needs and they can't take care of themselves and we have to provide for them, one, what did we talk about earlier? We match the asset with the liability. The liability is, I brought a child into this world who can't take care of themselves because they have some sort of special needs. So I need to provide for them. This is adulting at its finest, okay? And I'm going to do that by making sure that, one, I'm financially responsible, so when I'm here, I can take care of that child. And two, if I'm not here, I have an insurance policy to take care of them. And that insurance policy needs to be a permanent insurance policy. I had a conversation just 2 weeks ago with a friend of mine who has a child with very severe Fragile X. One less X chromosome. It affects males much worse than females. Female with Fragile X maybe has a diminution of an IQ of maybe 30 points, but a male is very significant. So male with Fragile X will never be able to hold a job, will never be able to live alone, and they had a term insurance policy and a special needs trust. They said, doesn't work. Doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And we always have to remember that if they have other children, there's extra special pressure on those children because when the parents aren't here, those children know who's in charge.
Right.
And there's pressure. So if we create a trust funded by a permanent life insurance policy to provide benefits when needed and when the government isn't there, but the government can't take them, that's the perfect world there. And if that child passes, it would go back to the surviving siblings. So in that situation, we need an absolute specialist, no DIY, no going into AI and saying I need a special needs trust. You need to hire an attorney that works in the special needs world and provides a special needs trust. You need to have a trustee that understands what their role is, and you need a permanent life insurance policy for whatever amount you feel appropriate. And then we've taken care of the child that can't take care of themselves. Isn't that what you would want?
That's exactly right.
So that's number one. They become special needs children, hopefully become special needs, or young adults with special needs, and they become adults with special needs. But the problem's still there, and we need to provide care. Care has become so incredibly expensive these days. With less nurses, with less people working in hospitals, with more competition in the higher pay grade there, traveling nurses make a tremendous amount of money. We're not finding someone for $20, $30, $40 an hour to take care of people. So the cost is going up, and we have to provide more and more money for that. Money can't solve every problem, but it solves some of these. And it could give that extra bit of care that I would want if this was a friend of mine, if it was a family member of mine. So one, make sure that there's the special needs trust, make sure that it's funded by an insurance policy, make sure that it eventually goes back to the other children, make sure the other children know about this because they feel pressure, because they know their parents aren't going to live forever, they're probably going to survive them. And a lot of times, although a child with autism or a child with Fragile X, they do not have a completely normal life expectancy because they can't have communication with doctors as well as others can. They can't communicate as well that something's wrong and go to the doctor. So their life expectancy is augmented a little bit, but it's probably longer than their children, than their parents. So we have to provide for them. Just like when I made Jamie and I made decisions for our family that was based on my income. If I wasn't here, I'd want Jamie and the kids to live in the world in which we created together. And that's why we had insurance, to replace my income. And early on, I'd want that for a child with special needs.
What are some of the most common mistakes when this happens with children with special needs, or even families that have a special needs child? What are some of those common mistakes that they make?
Yeah, I think one, not dealing with the situation. And by that I mean not setting up this trust. Maybe they have a will that says that child gets a third of their estate, or half of their estate, or 20% of their estate. Maybe they don't have a will, and the government provided will from the state says that the child gets that. And then Medicaid wants that money. Then the facility that they're in wants that money. So those are two estates. 3, not communicating with the other family members of what your wishes are. Usually when a family comes together to support a child with special needs, there is communication, but sometimes it's not. So I would hate to have this money that we've saved, that we've invested, that we didn't spend, go to for the long-term support of this child, and then have a facility or Medicaid take the money when they didn't have to.
Right.
That's an unforced error. So let's make sure that where's the value we could, as financial security professionals, where could we add value? 1, identifying the need. 2, being the project manager of making sure that the planning's done. 3, providing the life insurance that's needed. And 4, managing it and make sure it's up to date. And as the cost of care goes up, maybe we need more coverage. And that again is just the extra value you as professionals could bring to the table that will make you feel really good about what you do, and at the same time it could get you more referrals because people know you care and that you're a professional.
It's interesting, Howard, is this conversation is more relevant with more people than you would expect. And what I love about our organization, FinFit Life, this is part of our culture. This is part of the training and development. And it's not something that's, it's a special situation. It's actually real life that we're talking about and how we can engage with people on a day-to-day basis. And I do appreciate your background and experience, because when you have a person like yourself who lives and breathes it every day, it's not an abnormal conversation. It's a normal conversation. And ironically, if you were to talk to any family member of any of our associates or advisors in our organization, they probably have somebody that's been affected by one or more of these situations. And we for sure know that health has been one of the dynamic things that have happened in people's lives since COVID till today. Cancer and diseases have been as prevalent as ever. And these discussions are pertinent because assets have grown, and more government engagement of trying to, I'll call it, bother in personal affairs is more and more prevalent. So it's a real situation for most people.
You know, we talk about helping people live a longer, healthier, and better life. Longer. We help people live longer by being healthier.
Absolutely.
By physical fitness, by going to the doctor, by paying attention. Healthier, you know, we've talked about it because it's not about running marathons when you're 80 years old. It's about getting off the ground and playing with your grandchildren.
That's right.
But better. This falls into the better category. We're helping people live a better life because they're taking care of others. We're helping them live a better life because they know their children are provided for, even if they can't provide for themselves. Mm-hmm. Isn't that what we're all about? And it's so incredibly important. We all know people who have children with special needs. It's similar to when you start, especially when you're my age, you start to talk to your friends about providing long-term care for the parents, or for siblings, or for aunts and uncles, and the costs and complexity associated with it. We can't do everything, but we should surely provide an insurance policy that helps pay for that and helps provide concierge care for that. And the insurance companies that offer long-term care riders help clients, not just with the economics, but with the logistics of that planning. And it's so important. It's the same thing when dealing with estate planning. It's the same thing when dealing with special needs planning. It's the same thing when dealing with buy-sell agreements and keepers insurance. It's all about living this longer, better, and healthier life and making the most of it. We only have one shot at this life.
Right.
Let's make it longer, better, and healthier.